Senator Duckworth is next, joining us online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Flowers, thank you for your work as a fierce advocate for environmental justice, especially in functional sanitation for communities across the United States. Your testimony, it has very clearly demonstrated the very urgent need to address our failing infrastructure, especially in sanitation inequality. As chair of the Subcommittee on Fisheries, Wildlife, and Water, I agree and believe that access to clean, safe water is a basic human right, and that it is unacceptable that these very vulnerable communities are impacted by poor water quality and access. You can just look at the town of Centerville, Illinois, to see that oftentimes when these issues occur in neighborhoods of minority or low income communities, it takes far too long for the public to hear about it or for people to get involved. For decades, we have turned a blind eye to the water issues in this country and failed to provide adequate funding for these systems. My Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act would invest over 35 billion federal dollars to assist these vulnerable communities in receiving the funding they need to modernize their drinking water and wastewater infrastructure. I know that this amount of funding will be a great start, but this must be a continuing legacy in order to really make a difference. Ms. Flowers, would you agree that access to safe, reliable drinking water and wastewater is an environmental justice issue?
Yes, Senator Duckworth, it is an environmental justice issue. And clearly, what we saw in Lowndes County, we did a parasite study where we actually collected fecal blood and water and soil samples, and we found evidence of hookworm and other tropical parasites in areas, especially in areas where people are not dealing with proper sanitation. And this is a problem throughout the U.S. And yes, I went to Centerville and actually saw it firsthand. And I'm happy that you're sponsoring this type of fix. And it needs to be a continuous effort because the problems are worse than we even know because there's no central database that documents sanitation issues across the U.S.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point. Do you think that major federal investment in water infrastructure should be a top environmental justice priority?
Yes, because water is life, and none of us can live without water. And we have seen what happens when we don't deal with the health consequences of these issues, especially how it impacts the public, because it could very well be that typhoid and all the other kinds of things that comes about as a result of inadequate sanitation could happen again. And COVID has taught us when it comes to the public health that we cannot turn a blind eye to it because we are all impacted by it.
Water is life. You are so right. In Illinois, we have more known lead service lines than any other state in the country. And as you know, there is no known safe blood level for lead in our children. Therefore, these outdated pipes are a threat to our children's health, and this threat is especially higher for minority children. The Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act of 2021, which passed the full Senate with 89 votes on the floor, would invest federal dollars into the testing for and replacement of lead pipes. And the president has made it one of his top priorities to fund billions of dollars for the national full lead line replacement. Ms. Pulido and Ms. Flowers, do you think the federal government should prioritize billions of federal dollars to remove all of the lead service lines in this country?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I know it sounds like a no-brainer to you and me, but let me tell you, there are others who would argue otherwise. People of color are 1.5 times more likely to live in an area with poor air quality. This can lead to major health problems like asthma, heart attacks, cancer, and reproductive issues. In fact, if you're in Chicago and you go just 10 stops on our rapid transit system, the L from the part of Chicago, the Magnificent Mile, where you have shops selling $1,000 Gucci purses, and you go 10 stops on the L to a black and brown neighborhood, just 10 stops, the life expectancy drops by 18 years, not from gun violence, but from health issues like asthma, heart attacks, cancer. I have been pushing for efforts to increase air monitoring on a hyper-local level. Ms. Polito, to address the infrastructure inequity, would federal implementation of mapping and screening tools help address these shortcomings by identifying the communities that need it most and connect them with policy solutions? Furthermore, what other tools do you think are necessary to ensure the federal infrastructure investments are being discussed get to the correct, most vulnerable communities they are intended for?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Yes, we have to begin by simply, having the right data, right? And we don't have that, and it's a problem. It's on multiple levels. Oftentimes, we have poor quality data, so that needs to be really improved. A lot of times, community scientists and organizations, they do ground truthing to try to verify the data, like is there a pollution source there, and things like that. So improving the quality data is really, really important. Second of all, then, as I said earlier, we need to address like the cumulative impacts, right, versus the individual facility or emitter, which certainly is important, but does not capture like what you're saying is happening on those stops that have, an 18% or 18-year difference in longevity. So that's just cumulative environment that we're talking about. And we have very limited ability, although I know Illinois is one of the states that has made steps to begin talking about cumulative impacts. So we need to absolutely see that across the board. And this becomes really a very urgent, particularly in cities, in urban areas, more so than many rural areas, although not entirely, that's not the case. And one of the last things that you said is, what else does the federal government need to be doing? Or one of the things that I think is really important is to think about, I frankly feel that in the part of the federal government, as well as many other government agencies, there has been a lack of political will to really go after and enforce the existing environmental laws. I mean, we're not even talking about, people that aren't outside the scope of the law. We can't even enforce the existing laws. We've had cases, for example, in Los Angeles of major polluters such as Exide, which their lead emissions were 50 times over the regulatory limit. It took them decades, and they would not actually solve the problem. They were forced to finally close down, after which then they decided to declare bankruptcy, leaving the entire state of California with the cleanup bill for acres and acres of lead contamination. So there has to be a higher level of political will to actually enforce existing laws.
Thank you. I'm over time, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Senator Duckworth. We'll turn to